A friend set a widowed single dad up on a blind date with her sister. But when Luke Dawson reached table 9, the woman waiting beneath the candlelight was Victoria Bennett, the boss who signed his schedules and judged his work every Monday morning. He still had a trace of grease beneath one thumbnail. She still wore the calm expression that made entire conference rooms fall silent. Neither of them knew whether to sit down, walk away, or pretend the night had never happened. But this was never going to be just an awkward date. Hidden inside the shipping terminal where they worked was a dangerous secret one that would force Luke to face the tragedy that took his wife and test whether Victoria valued truth more than her career. Stay to the end, because this story is about grief, courage, fatherhood, and the risk of loving again. Like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. 3 days before Luke Dawson stood frozen beside table 9, his life still looked exactly the way he had designed it. Quiet, predictable, safe. At 4:45 on Tuesday morning, the alarm on his phone vibrated against the wooden nightstand. Luke silenced it before the second buzz. He had learned to wake quickly after Lily was born, back when every extra sound risked turning a restless infant into an hour of pacing the hallway. The other side of the bed remained untouched. It had been 4 years, but Luke still slept close to the edge. He sat up and pressed both hands over his face. The house was dark except for the pale blue glow from the digital clock. Outside, rainwater dripped from the gutters, striking the metal trash cans beside the garage with a slow, irregular rhythm. Luke dressed without turning on the bedroom light. Work pants, gray shirt, heavy socks. His wedding ring hung from a thin chain inside the top drawer. He did not wear it anymore. He also never moved it. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled faintly of the coffee grounds he had measured the night before. He started the machine, opened the refrigerator, and took out bread-sliced turkey, an apple, and a container of strawberries. Lily's lunchbox sat open on the counter. He packed everything in the same order he always did. Sandwich on the bottom, fruit on the right, napkin folded twice, a small handwritten note tucked beneath the juice pouch. Good luck on your science quiz. Remember that guessing confidently is not the same as knowing. He signed it. Dad, though there was no one else it could have been from. The coffee machine hissed behind him. Luke poured 1 cup and drank it standing beside the sink. He could have sat at the kitchen table, but he rarely did when Lily was not awake. The table had belonged to Emily. She had found it at an estate sale during the first year of their marriage. The surface was scarred, one leg was slightly shorter than the others, and the seller had apologized for its condition. Emily had run her hand across the scratches and said, "It already survived somebody else. That means it knows how." Luke had spent an entire Saturday sanding and repairing it. Now one corner still carried a faint crescent-shaped mark where Emily once set down a hot pan without a trivet. Luke could have removed it years ago. He never did. At 5:15, he carried his coffee into the laundry room. Emily's yellow raincoat still hung behind the door. Luke reached past it for his work jacket. The sleeve brushed his wrist. He paused, then continued as though nothing had happened. By 5:30, his truck was moving through the sleeping streets of Savannah. The city looked different before sunrise. Storefronts were dark. Traffic lights changed for empty intersections. Spanish moss hung from oak branches like shadows that had forgotten to disappear. As Luke drove east toward the port, the quiet neighborhoods gave way to warehouses, rail lines, and broad industrial roads lit by amber lamps. The cranes appeared in the distance before the river did. Tall steel frames stood against the dark sky, their red warning lights blinking above stacks of containers. From far away, they looked almost delicate. Luke knew better. At the security gate, he lowered his window. The guard glanced at his badge. "Morning, Dawson." "Morning. You ever sleep not professionally?" The guard laughed and waved him through. Luke parked near the south terminal and stepped into air that smelled of salt diesel fuel and wet steel. Somewhere beyond the warehouses, a ship sounded its horn. The low note rolled across the yard and settled in his chest. He clipped a radio to his belt and walked toward the operations building. By 6, the terminal was awake. Forklifts moved between container rows. Engines rumbled. Radios cracked with short instructions. Workers in reflective vests crossed painted lanes carrying clipboards and thermos cups. Luke moved through it all without wasting a step. He checked the night shift report, reviewed the arrival schedule, and corrected a loading sequence before the morning crew finished gathering. A young dock worker named Caleb Mercer approached him near the dispatch board. Caleb was 23, nervous, and still knew enough to apologize before he knew whether he had done anything wrong. "Mr. Dawson, I think I entered the east yard count twice." Luke looked at the screen. "You did." Caleb swallowed. "I can fix it." "You can." Luke moved aside and pointed to the duplicated line. "Delete this entry, recalculate the total, then call dispatch before they assign the next truck." Caleb stared at him. "That's it. What else were you expecting?" "I don't know. Simmons yelled at me for 10 minutes last week. Did it improve your counting? No. Then he wasted 10 minutes. Caleb corrected the error. Luke checked the new total and nodded once. "Slow is smooth. Smooth becomes fast. Go." Caleb hurried toward the dispatch office. From the second-floor window, Victoria Bennett watched the exchange. She had arrived at the terminal at 5:40, 20 minutes before her calendar required her presence. That was normal for Victoria. She often told the board that the South Terminal demanded close attention because it handled the most complicated freight in the region. That explanation was true. It was simply not complete. She stood with one hand around a paper cup of coffee, watching Luke cross the yard beneath the floodlights. He never raised his voice unless someone was in danger. He never performed competence for an audience. He did not become more respectful when executives arrived or less respectful when they left. Victoria had spent most of her career surrounded by men who changed posture the moment they learned her last name. Luke Dawson had treated her the same before and after he knew who she was. Professionally, she valued that. Personally, she had spent 14 months refusing to examine it too closely. Her office door opened behind her. Grant Holloway entered without knocking. He carried a folder under one arm and wore the expression of a man arriving to correct a mistake someone else had made. "You are here early," he said. "So are you. I have a 7 o'clock call with Charleston." Victoria turned from the window. "What do they want?" "Lower projected maintenance spending. They wanted that last quarter. They want it more now." Grant placed the folder on her desk. He was broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, and practiced at making criticism sound like concern. He had worked for Coastal Meridian Shipping for 17 years. He knew every board member, every contract manager, and every person in the company who preferred loyalty to questions. 14 months earlier, he had expected to become regional director. When Victoria received the position instead, Grant had congratulated her in front of the board. Later that night, he told 2 terminal managers that the company had chosen a family name over operational experience. The comment reached Victoria by morning. She never confronted him. She had learned early that correcting every insult only taught people which ones had reached her. Grant tapped the folder. 3 major inspections are due before the end of the quarter. Then schedule them. If we shut down all 3 cranes, we miss the Ellis Marine contract window. Stagger the work. That still creates delays. Delays are less expensive than failures. Grant smiled without warmth. That is the kind of sentence people say before they see the actual cost. Victoria opened the folder. Crane 12 appeared on the first page. The inspection status was marked acceptable pending routine service. She scanned the notes. No full load test surface review passed in the spring. That was 6 months ago. Nothing in the current report indicates an immediate problem. Victoria looked at Grant. Then why is the crane in this folder? Because procedures say I have to show you. And what do procedures say we should do? Grant pulled out the chair across from her desk. Procedures do not have to explain missed quarterly targets. Victoria closed the folder. Neither do broken machines. For a moment, Grant's expression hardened. Then the pleasant mask returned. I will revise the schedule. Do that. He stood, picked up the folder, and paused at the door. You spend a great deal of time at this terminal. It is my busiest terminal. There are people in Atlanta who think a regional director should be more regional. Then they are welcome to review my calendar. Grant glanced through the window toward the yard. Luke was speaking with a crane operator beside the south loading lane. I am only saying that visibility creates questions. Victoria looked directly at him. Good. Questions are useful. Grant left without replying. She remained still until his footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Then her eyes returned to the yard. Luke was gone. The absence bothered her more than it should have. Across town, Lily Dawson woke at 6:40 to the smell of toast. Mrs. Alvarez, the retired nurse who lived next door, sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper while Lily searched for her left shoe. It was beside the couch yesterday, Mrs. Alvarez said. I checked. Did you look beneath the blanket? Lily pulled up the blanket. The shoe was there. She frowned. That proves nothing. Mrs. Alvarez lowered the newspaper. You sound like your father. Dad says things have logical locations. Your father believes the universe files paperwork. Lily sat down and forced on the shoe. At 10 years old, she had Emily's dark eyes and Luke's habit of becoming very quiet when she was thinking. She opened her lunchbox and found the note. Mrs. Alvarez watched her read it. What does he say today? That confidence is not knowledge. Your father should put that on a shirt. He owns 3 shirts. He owns more than 3. He owns 3 that are not work shirts. Lily slipped the note into the front pocket of her backpack instead of throwing it away. She kept all of them in a blue box beneath her bed. At school, Claire Bennett found Lily in the hallway before first period. Claire worked as an elementary school counselor, though she spent nearly as much time fixing costume emergencies and calming nervous parents as she did in her office. She had known Lily for almost a year, ever since her son Mason joined the same community baseball team. Practice at 5, Claire reminded her. I know. Your dad knows I put it on the refrigerator and texted him twice. Excellent management. He needs it. Claire smiled. She liked Luke, not in the way several divorced mothers at the baseball field liked him. Claire had noticed those looks. Luke usually responded by becoming intensely interested in tying Lily's cleats. Claire liked the way he always brought extra bottled water for the team. She liked that he listened when children spoke, even when their stories wandered. She liked that he never treated being a father as an inconvenience someone else should praise him for overcoming. She also knew loneliness when she saw it. Luke wore his like a heavy coat in warm weather. By 5 that afternoon, the baseball field was crowded with folding chairs, coolers, and parents pretending not to care about practice statistics. Luke arrived 4 minutes late, still wearing his work shirt. Lily stood near the dugout with her hands on her hips. You said 5. It is 5:04. That is after 5. I apologize to the entire organization. Claire, seated behind home plate, raised one hand. The organization accepts. Luke looked at her and immediately became cautious. Claire had asked him about a blind date twice before. The first time he had pretended he did not hear. The second time he said he had to help the coach carry equipment. There had been no equipment. Claire waited until the children ran onto the field. Then she stepped beside him. Friday night, she said. Luke kept his eyes on Lily. No, you have not heard the rest. I know the rest. You know almost nothing. That is one of my concerns. Claire crossed her arms. My sister is smart. Most people begin with kind. She is kind, too. It just takes longer to notice. That sounds promising. She works too much. So do I. She forgets to eat lunch. I usually remember. She dislikes small talk. I actively avoid it. Claire leaned closer. You see how well this is going? Luke finally looked at her. I am not dating. You are standing beside a baseball field. I am asking you to eat dinner with a woman selected by her sister. Yes, that is a date. Only if you enjoy it. Luke shook his head. No. Claire let out a breath. You work. You go home. You take Lily to school and baseball. Then you work again. That is called parenting. No. Parenting is part of it. Hiding is the rest. His expression changed. Claire immediately knew she had gone too far, but she did not take the words back. Luke looked toward the field. Lily swung at a pitch and missed. She adjusted her grip and waited for the next one. Claire softened her voice. I am not asking you to replace anybody. You do not know what you are asking. Then tell me. Luke's jaw tightened. For a second, Claire thought he might walk away. Instead, he said, Some people are built for a second beginning, and you are not. I already had the part that mattered. On the field, Lily connected with the next pitch. The ball rolled between first and second base. She ran as if the entire season depended on reaching the bag. Claire watched Luke's face brighten despite himself. Then she said, You still have a life, Luke. His eyes remained on Lily. Yes. I mean one that belongs to you too. He gave no answer. Practice ended beneath a pink and gold sky. On the drive home, Lily sat in the passenger seat drinking from a bottle of water. Who is Claire's sister? Luke stared through the windshield. You were listening. You were standing 12 feet away. You were supposed to be practicing. I can do two things. Luke turned onto their street. Claire thinks I should have dinner with someone. I know. I am not going. Lily twisted the cap onto her bottle. Why? Because I do not know her. That is why people have dinner. I am busy. You tell me people make time for important things. Luke glanced at her. That is different. Because it is you. The question sounded so much like Emily that his hands tightened around the steering wheel. Lily looked out the window. Streetlights passed across her face, bright and dark, bright and dark. After a moment, she said, You do not have to forget Mom to eat dinner with somebody. Luke slowed near their driveway. He wanted to tell her that forgetting was not the danger. The danger was remembering how it felt to love someone without holding anything back. The danger was waking up one morning and discovering that the world had found the exact place to cut you open. Instead, he parked the truck. Lily reached for the door handle. Luke said, Friday. She turned. One dinner. Lily smiled. I will tell Claire. You will do no such thing. She was already opening the door. At 9 that night, Claire called her sister. Victoria answered from her office. The building around her had gone quiet. The cleaning crew had emptied the trash, and the last assistant had left nearly an hour earlier. Victoria sat beneath the cold white light of her desk lamp reading projected freight numbers. You are having dinner Friday, Claire said. No, his name is Luke. Victoria's eyes stopped moving across the spreadsheet. For no reason she wanted to examine, she looked toward the dark window. Luke what? No last names. Why? Because you investigate people. I verify information. You searched Daniel's property records. He claimed to own a vineyard. He had grapes. He had 6 vines behind a dental clinic. Claire laughed. Victoria closed the spreadsheet. What does this Luke do? He works somewhere near the port. The coincidence pressed lightly against Victoria's ribs. There were thousands of employees across Savannah's shipping industry, hundreds of men named Luke. She could have asked one more question. Which company? Which terminal? What kind of work? Instead, she leaned back in her chair. Why him? Claire was quiet for a moment. Because he is steady without being cold. Because he listens to children as if they are adults worth hearing. Because he looks tired even when he smiles. And because I think he has forgotten that being needed is not the same thing as being known. Victoria looked down at the closed file on her desk. Grant's maintenance report remained beneath it. Does he know anything about me? Only that you are my sister. You did not tell him what I do. You never tell me what you do. That is not true. You say things like regional review and operational restructuring until I stop asking. Victoria almost smiled. Claire continued. Friday at 7:30, River House, table 9. I have a call at 6. Then finish it. I may be late. You will not. Victoria looked at her reflection in the window. Dark hair pinned back, white blouse, tired eyes, the same composed face she wore in board meetings. What if we have nothing to say? Then eat quietly. You are both good at that." Victoria agreed before she could build a better excuse. After the call ended, she remained at her desk. The name Luke stayed with her. Not Luke Dawson, she told herself. Just Luke. A common name. Nothing more. At home, Luke stood in front of his bedroom closet Friday evening while Lily sat on the edge of the bed. She rejected his first shirt because it looked like something he would wear to a parent conference. She rejected the second because it still had a faded company logo near the pocket. The third was dark blue. That one, she said. Luke buttoned it. The fabric pulled slightly across his shoulders. "I hate this shirt. That means it is correct." He looked at her through the mirror. "Claire has influenced you. Claire has good ideas." Luke adjusted the collar. Lily grew quiet. "Dad." "Yes. If you like her, are you going to be sad?" Luke turned. Lily picked at a loose thread on the comforter. He sat beside her. "I might be." Then why go? Luke considered the question. Because he had promised. Because Claire refused to accept no. Because Lily had reminded him of every rule he applied to everyone except himself. Finally, he said, "Sometimes being scared of something does not mean it is wrong." Lily studied him. "That sounds like something you should write in my lunch. It sounds too long." She leaned against his shoulder. For one brief moment, Luke closed his eyes. Downstairs, the babysitter rang the bell. 2 towns away, Victoria stood before her own mirror. She had already changed twice. The first dress felt too formal. The second looked as though she was attending a corporate dinner. She chose a simple black dress and a light coat. On the dresser sat a framed photograph of Victoria and Claire as teenagers, both sunburned and laughing beside their father's old fishing boat. Victoria looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up her keys. At Coastal Meridian, Grant Holloway stood in his office with a maintenance deferral form open on his computer. Crane 12 required a complete structural review before the end of the quarter. The inspection would take the crane offline for at least 3 days. 3 days would place the Ellis Marine schedule at risk. Grant changed the proposed inspection date. He moved it forward by 12 weeks. A warning appeared on the screen. Deferred inspection requires regional approval. Grant selected operational exception. The warning vanished. He entered his authorization code and pressed submit. He did not notice the technician's note attached to the previous inspection. Unusual vibration under full load. Recommend internal connector assessment. Grant closed the file. At 7:26, Luke parked near the Savannah riverfront. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror and saw the faint line of grease beneath one thumbnail. He tried to wipe it away. It spread across the skin. At 7:28, Victoria entered the restaurant through the opposite door. The hostess smiled at her. "Table 9. Victoria nodded. She followed the woman past the candlelit windows and sat down beneath a painting of the river at dusk. At 7:31, Luke stepped inside. The hostess checked her tablet. "Your party is already here." Luke followed her between the tables, one hand briefly touching the collar Lily had chosen. Then Victoria looked up, and the safe, carefully separated pieces of both their lives met beneath the same candlelight. For several seconds, Luke remained standing beside the empty chair. Victoria sat perfectly still, one hand resting near her water glass. The restaurant moved around them as if nothing unusual had happened. Silverware touched porcelain. A woman near the window laughed into her wine. Somewhere behind the bar, ice spilled into a metal container. The hostess looked from Luke to Victoria. "You two know each other?" "Yes," Victoria said. "No," Luke said at the same time. The hostess blinked. Luke cleared his throat. "We work together." Victoria's eyes remained on him. "That would have been my answer too." The hostess placed the menu in front of the empty chair. "I'll give you a moment." She walked away quickly. Luke looked toward the front door. Victoria noticed. "You can leave. So can you. I was here first. That does not make it less complicated." "No. It only means I had more time to become uncomfortable." A sound escaped Luke before he could stop it. Not quite a laugh, but close enough to surprise both of them. Victoria looked down at the candle. My sister said your name was Luke. Claire said her sister was Victoria. She never told me your last name. She never told me hers. Victoria pressed her lips together. You know Claire from the baseball field. Our children play together. I know she has a son. I did not know she had quietly recruited one of my employees into the family. Luke lowered his voice. Did she know I work for you? No. You are sure? Victoria's gaze sharpened. I would not arrange a blind date with someone who reports to me. I did not say you arranged it. You were thinking it. I was thinking several things. The waiter arrived carrying a bottle of sparkling water. Good evening. May I start you with something to drink? Victoria looked at Luke. Luke looked at Victoria. Water, they said together. The waiter poured without comment. When he left, Luke finally sat. His chair made a soft scraping sound across the floor. Victoria aligned her water glass with the edge of the table. Luke had seen her perform the same small movement before board calls and disciplinary meetings. It was the habit of someone giving her hands a task while her mind worked somewhere else. You do that at work, he said. Do what? Straighten things before a difficult conversation. Victoria looked at the glass. You have been watching me. It is my job to know when a meeting is about to become difficult. This is not a meeting. No. The word settled between them. Victoria picked up her menu, though her eyes did not move across the page. We could finish one drink, and then we leave separately. Monday morning, this never happened. She looked at him over the top of the menu. That seems sensible. Luke opened his own menu. That is usually how trouble begins. The waiter returned and described the evening specials. Luke heard almost none of it. He was aware of Victoria's perfume, subtle and unfamiliar. At work, she smelled faintly of coffee paper and the clean air from her office conditioning. Here she seemed like someone he had never met, even though he had stood across from her every Monday for 14 months. When the waiter left, Victoria asked, What did Claire tell you about me that you are smart? That is suspiciously vague. She said you are kind. Victoria's eyebrows lifted. She began with smart, did she not? She did. That sounds more like Claire. She also said you work too much and forget to eat lunch. Victoria glanced toward the bread basket. She told a stranger about my meals. She told me almost nothing else. What did she say you do? She said something near the port. Victoria stared at him. She did that deliberately. She has a strong relationship with incomplete information. What did she tell you about herself that she has a sister who needs dinner? Victoria leaned back. That is deeply irritating. Luke almost smiled. She also said you dislike small talk. I do. Then we have something in common. For the first time, the tension eased slightly. They ordered dinner because leaving immediately would have required explaining why. Victoria chose grilled fish. Luke ordered steak after staring at the menu long enough for the waiter to assume he had made a thoughtful decision. For the first few minutes, they spoke about Claire. Victoria told Luke that her sister had been arranging other people's lives since childhood. At 11, Claire once invited two separated neighbors to the same backyard birthday party and seated them beside each other because she believed they were lonely. Did it work? Luke asked. They remarried. Luke looked toward the front windows. That is concerning. Claire considers it proof of expertise. Luke told Victoria that Claire had approached him 3 times at baseball practice. And you said no twice. What changed? Luke hesitated. My daughter. Lily. He looked at her. You know her name. It is listed in your emergency contact information. That sounds less personal when you explain it. Victoria lowered her eyes. I have also heard you speak about her. At work. You took a call outside the South Warehouse last month. She had a school project. Luke remembered. Lily had called because the cardboard ocean current model had collapsed 10 minutes before class. She thought the Gulf Stream moved north because warm water liked Canada. Victoria smiled. That is not the worst theory I have heard in a conference room. Luke laughed. This time it came without resistance. Victoria watched the change in his face. At the terminal, Luke's expressions were controlled and economical. Approval was a nod. Frustration was a tightening near his jaw. Humor rarely reached farther than a quiet breath through his nose. Here beneath the low restaurant lights, his smile made him look younger. "What does she want to be?" Victoria asked. "This week, that changes constantly. Marine biologist, ship designer, astronaut. Last month, she wanted to become the person who names hurricanes. Is that a job she believes it should be? She may be right." Luke looked down at the table. "She is usually more certain than the facts allow, like her father." His eyes lifted. Victoria's smile was small but unmistakable. Luke shook his head. "You are different outside the terminal. So are you. I am wearing a different shirt." "That is not what I meant." The waiter placed their plates on the table. For a few minutes they ate quietly. The silence was not unpleasant. That surprised Luke more than anything else. He had been on 2 dates since Emily died. Both had been arranged by friends who believed enough time had passed. Both women were kind. Both asked reasonable questions. Luke had answered politely and spent the entire evening waiting to return home. With Victoria, he did not feel as though he were performing normalcy for someone else. He felt exposed. That was more dangerous. Victoria set down her fork. "Why did you take the supervisor position?" Luke's shoulders tightened. "What do you mean?" "You are overqualified. That is not a question people usually ask when they are satisfied with the work. I am satisfied with the work. Then perhaps I chose well. You review structural diagrams faster than most of our engineers. You catch load distribution errors before software flags them. You read maintenance reports that are not part of your responsibilities." Luke wiped his mouth with the napkin. "I pay attention. You do more than that." He said nothing. Victoria studied him. There was a report several years ago concerning a support failure at the port of Charleston. Luke's hand stopped beside his glass. The original inspection approved the crane for continued operation. Someone submitted a second assessment anonymously. He looked toward the candle. Victoria continued carefully. The report identified a hidden fracture in the support frame. The crane was taken offline. When they opened the structure, the damage was worse than the report predicted. Luke's voice became quiet. "Why were you reading old engineering files? I was helping develop a regional safety review. That was before you joined Coastal Meridian." "Yes. And you remember one report, I remember a sentence." Luke did not ask which one. Victoria said it anyway. "Steele does not care how badly management needs the deadline." His expression closed. All warmth disappeared from his face. Victoria knew immediately that she had crossed a line. "You wrote it," she said. Luke turned his water glass slowly. "I supervise cargo operations. That is not an answer. It is the answer I give." "Why?" He looked at her then. The pain in his eyes was not fresh. It had settled too deeply for that. It looked like something carried so long that the body had learned to bend around its weight. "My wife was an engineer." Victoria did not move. Her name was Emily. Luke's voice remained even, but each word seemed placed carefully, as though a careless one might open something he could not close. She found a fracture in a warehouse frame. Management wanted another inspection before they stopped work. They said her calculations were too conservative. The client had a deadline. Victoria's fingers tightened around the napkin in her lap. The structure collapsed while she was inside. The restaurant noise seemed to recede. Luke looked beyond Victoria toward something only he could see. "She called me that morning. She said the frame was making a sound it should not make. I told her to leave. She said she needed photographs. 5 minutes. That was all she wanted." His jaw tightened. The building came down before those 5 minutes were over. Victoria took a slow breath. "I am sorry." Luke's eyes returned to hers. "I do not need sympathy." "No." The answer surprised him. Victoria reached toward the bread basket and moved it closer to his plate. The gesture was small and almost absurdly ordinary. Luke stared at it. She did not touch his hand. She did not tell him that he could not have known or that Emily would want him to move forward. She did not ask him to explain the parts of the story he had left unsaid. She simply made space for the silence. After a moment, Luke took a piece of bread. "My license expired 3 years ago," he said. "You chose not to renew it." "Yes." "Why terminal operations?" He looked down at his hands. "I wanted work where the worst mistake I could make was a delayed truck." Victoria's eyes held his. "You do not believe that anymore." Luke thought about the cranes standing over the river, the weight suspended above workers, the reports people signed without reading, the schedules that became more important when numbers were attached to them. "No," he said. "I do not." His phone illuminated beside his plate. A message from Lily appeared. "Did you meet her? Is she weird?" Luke turned the screen face down, but Victoria had already seen enough. "She knows this is a date. She knows more than I wanted her to. Children usually do." "Do you have children?" Victoria shook her head. "I never decided whether I wanted them." "You still can." That was not an invitation for optimism. It was an observation. "I have barely kept a plant alive." Luke looked at her. "What kind of cactus?" He paused. "You killed a cactus I traveled for 3 weeks. They are designed for that. I may have overwatered it before I left." "How much a pitcher?" Luke stared. Victoria lifted her chin. "I was being responsible. You drowned a desert plant." She laughed. The sound was warm and unguarded. Luke found himself laughing with her. For a brief stretch of time, the restaurant disappeared. There was no director, no employee, no performance review, no dead wife, no family reputation. There were only 2 tired people sharing a table neither had chosen. That was what made the evening impossible to dismiss. When the check arrived, Luke reached for it. Victoria placed her hand over the leather folder first. "You are not paying for your director. You are not my director here." Her hand remained on the folder. "That is precisely the problem." Luke withdrew his hand. Victoria divided the bill without asking permission. Outside, the night air was thick with humidity. Music drifted from a bar near the river. Carriages moved slowly over the cobblestone street, and the lights from passing boats shimmered on the dark water. Luke and Victoria stood beneath the restaurant awning. For the first time since dinner began, they had no table between them. Victoria held her coat over one arm. "Monday morning," she said, "we return to work." Luke nodded. "You are Ms. Bennett. You are Mr. Dawson. We do our jobs. We do them exactly as we did before." That sounds simple. It needs to be. A car passed, spraying water from the curb. Victoria looked toward the parking garage. Luke noticed that she had not moved. "What are you worried about?" he asked. She met his eyes. "That Friday will make Monday feel dishonest." Before he could answer, she walked away. Luke watched her cross the street beneath the riverfront lights. The cranes rose in the distance above the warehouses. One red warning light flashed near the top of Crane 12. Then it went dark. Luke drove home by the long route. He passed the terminal entrance, though it added 15 minutes to the trip. The security lights cast pale circles across the empty access road. Crane 12 stood near the water, its boom extended over a waiting ship. Luke slowed without meaning to. He could not see anything wrong. That did not quiet the feeling beneath his ribs. At home, Lily was asleep on the couch beneath a blanket. The babysitter sat nearby watching television with the volume low. Luke paid her and walked her to the door. When he returned, Lily opened one eye. "You are late. You are supposed to be asleep." "I was waiting." "For what?" "To see your face." Luke set his keys on the table, and Lily sat up. "You liked her." Luke removed his coat. "You have no evidence. You did not answer quickly." "That is not evidence. It is when you do it." He looked at his daughter. She smiled and pulled the blanket beneath her chin. Is she weird a little? Good. Lily closed her eyes again. Luke carried her upstairs. As he lowered her onto the bed, she caught his sleeve. Did you tell her about Mom? Luke froze. Yes. Lily opened her eyes. You never tell people. I know. She released his sleeve. Then she must be different. Luke pulled the blanket over her shoulders. Go to sleep. In his bedroom, he opened the top drawer of the nightstand. Emily's wedding ring lay beside an expired engineering identification card. He picked up neither. Monday morning arrived with low clouds and heavy air. Luke entered the briefing room 2 minutes before 6. Victoria stood at the front beside the whiteboard. Her hair was pinned back. She wore a dark gray suit and the expression she used during executive reviews. Nothing in her face suggested they had shared dinner. Luke took his usual place near the back wall. Grant entered carrying a tablet. Workers settled into chairs. Victoria began. 3 vessel arrivals this week. The Ellis Marine shipment has moved forward by 12 hours. Mr. Dawson confirmed South Yard staffing. Luke looked at her. Confirmed Ms. Bennett. The formality sounded louder than it should have. Victoria continued through load assignments, weather concerns, and equipment schedules. The meeting ran 4 minutes longer than usual. No one appeared to notice except Luke. When the crew left, he remained beside the doorway. Victoria erased a figure from the whiteboard. You have a question. I could request a transfer. The marker stopped in her hand. To where West Terminal. Different reporting structure. She turned. Is that what you want? No. Then why are you proposing it? Luke glanced toward the empty hallway. I do not want you defending your decisions because someone saw us at dinner. My decisions do not require a defense. They will if people think I am receiving special treatment. You are not. I know that. You know that. Victoria placed the marker on the ledge. And everyone else. They will believe whatever is most interesting. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You have considered this all weekend? Yes. So have I. Luke waited. Victoria moved behind the conference table, restoring distance between them. We establish boundaries. We already had them. They changed. That is the problem. No private meetings unless the work requires them, she said. No personal communication during working hours. No decisions regarding your position without another director reviewing them. Luke nodded. And no second dinner. Victoria's voice was steady. Not while you report directly to me. Luke held her gaze. Understood. The word sounded more final than either expected. He turned toward the door. Luke. It was the first time she had used his first name at work. He stopped. Victoria's expression softened, then immediately tightened again. Thank you for not making this harder. He looked at her. I am trying not to. He left before she could answer. By Wednesday, both of them were failing in small, careful ways. Victoria spent more time at the South Terminal than her calendar required. Luke noticed her before she reached his section of the yard, even when his back was turned. Neither crossed the boundaries they had set. They simply became more aware of where every boundary stood. That afternoon, Luke crouched beside a cable guide while Caleb watched. The clamp is seated, Caleb said. It is. Then why are we checking it again? Because someone else checked it first. Caleb frowned. That sounds like you do not trust him. It means trust does not replace verification. Victoria approached carrying 2 paper cups. Caleb straightened immediately. Director Bennett, Mr. Mercer. She looked at Luke. You missed lunch. Luke stood. How do you know the untouched sandwich on your desk? You were in my office. The door was open. She held out 1 cup. Luke accepted it. Black coffee, 1 sugar. He looked at her. You remembered. You order the same thing every Monday. Caleb looked between them. Victoria noticed. She turned to him. Mr. Mercer, the load sequence for Lane 6 needs confirmation. Caleb understood the dismissal. Yes, ma'am. He walked away quickly. Luke took a sip. You notice everyone's coffee, no? The word left her before caution could stop it. Neither moved. A crane horn sounded across the yard. Victoria stepped back. Finish your inspection, Mr. Dawson. Yes, Ms. Bennett. From an office window above the loading lanes, Grant watched them separate. Later that day, he joined Victoria near Crane 12. You are spending a great deal of time with Dawson. I am spending time on the floor. People notice patterns. Then they should notice the missing maintenance confirmations on this crane. Grant slid his hands into his pockets. You seem defensive. You seem interested in something that is not your responsibility. I am trying to protect your reputation. Victoria looked at him. No, Grant. You are waiting for me to need protection. His expression hardened. Then he smiled. Everyone needs it eventually. He walked away. Victoria remained beside the crane. Luke stood 20 yards away reviewing a loading sheet. For the first time, she wondered who had seen them at the restaurant. The answer arrived before the end of the shift. A night technician mentioned that Crane 12 had triggered a warning alarm shortly after midnight on Sunday. How long, Luke asked. 10 seconds, maybe less. What code did not see one? Was it entered in the shift report? The technician looked uncomfortable. It cleared itself. That was not my question. No. Luke went directly to the digital records. The alarm history contained nothing. He checked the maintenance schedule. Crane 12 had passed a visual review in the spring, but the complete internal assessment had been delayed. The authorization belonged to Grant Holloway. Luke printed the report. At the base of the crane, he found fine gray dust around the connector housing. He rubbed it between his fingers. A mechanic named Owen Price watched him. Normal wear, Owen said. Luke looked up at the steel joint. No. We cleaned it last week. That is why it is not normal. Owen crouched beside him. What are you seeing, fresh metal? Luke photographed the housing from several angles. He requested the spring inspection images and carried them to Victoria. She closed her office door only after calling another manager into the room as a witness. The formality did not escape either of them. Luke spread the images across the conference table. This mark here. Victoria leaned closer. A pale crescent curved along the edge of the main connector. Corrosion fatigue. You can tell from a photograph. I can tell enough to know we need a better inspection. Victoria studied his face. How serious? If the fracture extends beneath the housing, the boom could shift under load. She looked toward the window. Crane 12 was lifting a container from a ship. Stop operations. Luke did not move. You need technical confirmation. I need the crane empty. Within an hour, Victoria called an informal review. Grant arrived with 2 regional engineers, Douglas Reed and Marissa Cole. Luke arranged the inspection photographs across the table. Grant remained standing. This is unnecessary, he said. The spring review passed. It passed a surface inspection, Luke replied. Douglas examined the image. The mark could be load cycling. Luke placed a second photograph beside it. Load cycling creates a broader pattern. This begins at the connector edge and moves inward. Marissa leaned closer. He may be right. Grant looked at her. Based on one photograph, based on the direction of the scoring. Luke pointed to the maintenance record. The internal assessment was deferred. The alarm history is empty even though a technician heard the warning. Grant's face tightened. You supervise cargo crews, Dawson. You do not certify structural equipment. Luke met his eyes. I used to. Your license is expired. The steel does not know that. The room fell silent. Victoria looked at Douglas. If Luke is right, what is the risk? Douglas sat back. A connector failure under full load could drop the boom. Schedule ultrasonic testing and a complete internal inspection, Victoria said. Crane 12 remains offline. Grant placed both hands on the table. The Ellis Marine vessel arrives tomorrow. Then it waits. We lose the performance bonus. Then we lose it. You are accepting the opinion of a man who works for you and who no longer holds an active engineering license. Victoria closed the folder. I am accepting the visible evidence that your report failed to address. Grant looked from Victoria to Luke. Something cold settled behind his eyes. He gathered his tablet. You should both consider how this appears. Victoria's voice remained calm. Consider how a collapsed crane appears. Grant left without answering. After the engineers departed, Luke remained near the table. Victoria stood by the window. He knows, Luke said. Yes. About dinner. Yes. We should disclose it. Victoria turned. You agree I do not want him holding it over you. Or you. Luke shook his head. He cannot damage much that I care about. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. That is not true. He did not ask what she meant. She opened her computer. I will contact Human Resources tonight. Luke nodded. I will provide a statement. You are not worried I am worried. You sound calm. I am not ashamed. Victoria's hand stopped above the keyboard. Luke continued. Claire arranged a dinner. We did not know. Nothing improper happened. No. The answer was quiet. Nothing improper had happened. The truth did not make the memory of her fingers near his hand feel less intimate. Luke stepped toward the door. Good night, Ms. Bennett. Good night, Mr. Dawson. He opened the door. Luke. He looked back. Victoria's face held something she did not permit into her voice. I believe you about the crane. Luke nodded once. I know. That evening he returned to the locker room after most of the crew had left. The fluorescent light above his locker flickered. Luke opened the metal door. A plain white envelope lay on top of his folded jacket. His name was written across the front in block letters. He looked down the empty row of lockers. No footsteps. No voices. Luke opened the envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a maintenance form. The document stated that Crane 12's internal connector assembly had been replaced 8 months earlier. Luke studied the serial number listed at the bottom. Then he compared it with the number visible in his photograph. They did not match. The part had never been replaced. Across the lower edge of the page, someone had written 6 words in unsteady black ink. Ask Ray what Grant made him sign. Luke read the sentence twice. The fluorescent light above him flickered again, briefly dimming the narrow row of lockers. Somewhere beyond the concrete wall, a forklift reversed with a slow electronic beep. The terminal was still operating, but the locker room felt abandoned. Luke folded the paper and slipped it into his shirt pocket. Raymond Cole had worked at Coastal Meridian longer than almost anyone. He knew every crane by sound, every operator by habit, and every manager by the promises they had failed to keep. He was 6 months from retirement and counted the days aloud whenever someone asked him to stay late. Luke found him in the maintenance shed shortly after midnight. Ray stood at a workbench beneath a single yellow bulb, wiping a socket wrench with a rag. The tool was already clean. He glanced up when Luke entered. You are supposed to be home. So are you. Ray returned his attention to the wrench. I was finishing something. Luke closed the door behind him. The shed smelled of oil, cold metal, and rain that had blown in through the open loading bay earlier that evening. Luke placed the photocopied maintenance form on the bench. Ray stopped wiping. His face did not change, but his fingers tightened around the rag. Where did you get that? It was in my locker. I did not put it there. I did not ask if you did. Ray looked toward the closed door. Luke lowered his voice. The form says Crane 12 received a new connector assembly 8 months ago. The serial number proves it did not. Ray took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You should leave this alone. 2 workers stand beneath that boom every morning. And you think I do not know that? Then tell me what Grant made you sign. Ray stared at him. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Ray turned, crossed to an old metal cabinet, and removed a small spiral notebook from behind a stack of equipment manuals. The cover was stained with grease. The corners had curled from years of use. He placed it on the bench between them. I started writing things down 3 years ago, Ray said. Not because I planned to be brave, because I wanted proof that I was not losing my mind. Luke opened the notebook. Each page contained dates, equipment numbers, names, and short descriptions written in Ray's compact handwriting. Inspection incomplete. Labor not performed. Part ordered but never installed. Grant requested signature before review. Alarm cleared without repair. Luke turned another page. Crane 12 appeared repeatedly. You signed these reports. Some of them. Why Ray's jaw worked before he answered. Because Grant called it temporary paperwork. He said the work would be completed the following week. Then the next week became the next month. And when you refused, he reminded me how close I was to retirement. Luke looked up. He threatened your pension. He never used those words. He did not need to. Ray leaned against the workbench. I have 37 years in this company. My wife's medication comes through my retirement plan. Grant knew exactly what to say without saying anything anyone could report. Luke turned another page. Why keep the notebook? Because somebody had to remember what really happened. Why give it to me now? Ray looked toward the wall as though he could see through it to the dark silhouette of Crane 12. That machine made a sound Sunday night. What kind of sound? A deep knock from inside the connector housing. Not vibration. Not cable movement. Metal shifting where metal should not move. Luke waited. Ray swallowed. I heard the same sound in Mobile 19 years ago. A boom came down before the operator could clear the cab. 2 men died. The yellow bulb hummed above them. Ray placed one palm on the notebook. I told myself this was different. I told myself the spring inspection passed. Then I watched you study that dust at the base of the joint. You knew. I suspected. That is enough to stop the crane. It should have been. Ray's voice broke on the final word. He looked down at his hands. I kept saying I would report everything after retirement. 6 months. That was all I needed. Then nobody could touch my pension. Luke closed the notebook gently. You are reporting it now. Ray gave a bitter laugh. No. I am handing it to someone else and hoping he has more courage. Luke pushed the notebook back toward him. You kept the record when everyone else made it disappear. That matters. It does not make me brave. No. But opening that cabinet does. Ray looked at Luke for a long moment. Then he slid the notebook across the bench again. Take it. Luke placed it inside his jacket. If Grant asks, you never gave me anything. Ray shook his head. If Grant asks, tell him I am done lying. By 7 the next morning, Grant knew Luke had been asking questions. He called Luke into the operations office before the first loading shift. Grant sat behind the desk with a personnel folder open in front of him. Victoria was not present. Luke remained standing. You have been interfering with maintenance personnel, Grant said. I asked about a falsified inspection. You questioned employees outside your department and removed documents without authorization. I have not removed company documents. Grant leaned back. You are not an engineer here, Dawson. I did not claim to be. You are behaving as though your old credentials place you above procedure. Luke met his eyes. Procedure says Crane 12 should be offline. Director Bennett has requested a review. That does not give you permission to conduct your own investigation. Someone erased an alarm record. That is an accusation. It is an observation. Grant closed the folder. Effective immediately. You are reassigned to warehouse inventory until I complete a performance review. Luke stared at him. That removes my access to the equipment logs. It removes you from an area where you have exceeded your authority. Grant extended a printed order. Luke did not take it. You are trying to stop me from finding the rest. Grant's expression remained calm. You should be more careful with statements like that. The office door opened. Victoria entered carrying a tablet. She looked at the paper in Grant's hand, then at Luke. What is this, a temporary reassignment? Grant said. Approved by whom, as Vice President of Terminal Operations, I have the authority. Not when the employee is a witness in an active safety review. Grant's eyes narrowed. There is no active investigation. There is now. Victoria took the order from his hand and tore it once down the center. The sound was quiet. It carried through the room. Grant stood. You are making this personal. Victoria placed the torn pages on his desk. You made it personal when you tried to isolate the employee who identified a structural risk. You had dinner with him. Luke looked at Victoria. Grant smiled slightly. Yes, I know. Victoria did not react. The dinner was disclosed to Human Resources last night. Grant's smile faded. Convenient. Documented, she said. There is a difference. He looked between them. You are placing your career behind a man with an expired license and a history no one here fully understands. Luke stepped forward. Victoria spoke before he could. My career is not the piece of equipment carrying 40 tons over human beings. Grant gathered his folder. This will go to the board. It should. He walked to the door, then stopped beside Luke. You think she can protect you? Luke's voice was low. I think the truth does not need protection. It needs evidence. Grant left. The door closed behind him. Luke turned to Victoria. You should not have done that. Torn the order, made yourself part of this. I became part of it when I signed the shutdown request. He will use the dinner. He already tried. He can damage you. Victoria looked tired, but not uncertain. Stop deciding what I am willing to risk. I am trying to protect you. I do not need protection from my own choices. Luke's jaw tightened. I could resign. And then Grant controls the story. He says a troubled employee imagined a defect crossed department lines and quit before anyone could question him. I can give the notebook to the board. What notebook? Luke looked toward the office windows. Then he removed Ray's spiral book from inside his jacket and placed it on the desk. Victoria opened it. Her eyes moved quickly across the first page, then the second. The color left her face. How long has this been happening? At least 3 years. She turned another page. These labor entries were billed. No crew performed the work. Parts were ordered, but not installed. Victoria closed the notebook. We need copies of every related record before Grant knows what we have. He may already know. Then we do it now. They spent the next 4 hours gathering what the company system still allowed them to see. Several files were missing. Others had been modified recently. A replacement connector had been purchased for Crane 12, but the shipment was redirected to another terminal. Maintenance labor had been charged on nights when no crew had entered the yard. 3 alarm events appeared in backup summaries, but not in the active system. Victoria printed everything. Luke photographed the screen with a company camera. By late afternoon, access to the historical database disappeared. Victoria called information security. The technician told her the restriction came from an executive account. Grant's account. She hung up. He knows. Luke looked at the dark computer screen. Then the original files may be gone by morning. Victoria placed Ray's notebook inside a document bag. My home access uses a separate corporate archive. Grant cannot block it without board approval. Luke glanced at her. You want to take this to your house, I want to preserve the evidence. That creates another problem. The problem already exists. Victoria. It was the first time he had used her first name at work. She looked at him. We cannot be alone at your house after disclosing the date. We can invite legal counsel and wait 2 hours while Grant erases the server. Luke said nothing. Victoria continued. You can stand on the porch while I retrieve the files if that makes you feel better. It will not. Good. Then we agree. Rain began after dark. Luke drove behind Victoria through streets shining beneath the traffic lights. Water moved across the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Her house stood in a quiet neighborhood south of the river, a brick home beneath large oak trees. It was smaller than Luke expected. Victoria opened the door wearing the same clothes she had worn all day. She had removed her jacket and rolled her sleeves to her elbows. Inside the house was clean but not carefully decorated. A stack of unopened mail sat near the door. One framed photograph showed Victoria and Claire as teenagers beside an old fishing boat. Luke noticed a dead plant on the windowsill. Victoria followed his gaze. "Do not say it. I did not. You were going to. It looks recent. It lasted longer than the cactus." They sat at the kitchen table with Ray's notebook between them. Victoria connected to the corporate archive. Luke called out equipment numbers while she searched dates. The rain struck the windows steadily. By 11:30 they found the first clear pattern. Replacement parts had been purchased but never installed. At midnight, they found invoices for inspections that never occurred. At 12:40, Victoria recovered a deleted administrative log showing that Grant's account had cleared 2 alarm events. At 1:15, Luke matched an override code to 3 early departures approved after safety warnings. Victoria leaned back. "This is not cost-cutting. No, it is fraud, and Crane 12 is still the immediate problem." Victoria opened the latest operating schedule. The crane was marked inactive pending review. Then the screen refreshed. A new line appeared. "Early departure authorized. Loading begins at 5:30. Victoria sat forward. Grant overrode the shutdown. Luke checked the authorization time. 11:48. While they were gathering evidence, Grant had put the crane back into service. Victoria reached for her phone. Before she could call, thunder cracked above the house. Luke froze. The sound was too close to breaking steel. His chair scraped backward. The kitchen disappeared. For 1 second, he saw dust filling a warehouse corridor. He heard Emily's voice through a phone line. 5 more minutes. I only need photographs." "Luke." Victoria's voice reached him from a distance. He pressed one hand against the table. "I am fine." "No." She stood but did not touch him. "You are here, but you are not in this room." Luke stared at the rain sliding down the window. "She called me before it happened." Victoria remained silent. "I told her to leave. She said 5 minutes. His breathing turned shallow. "I should have driven there. You were 40 miles away. I should have called the fire department. You believed the company would listen. I should have known better." Victoria stepped closer. "You warned her. I did not stop her. You loved someone who believed evidence would be enough." Luke looked at Ray's notebook. It should have been. Victoria placed her hand on the table near his. Not over his. Near enough for him to choose. Luke looked at the space between their fingers. Then he moved his hand until they touched. The contact was quiet and steady. Neither spoke. Victoria's computer sounded another alert. The loading sequence for Crane 12 had been confirmed. Luke withdrew his hand and stood. "What time is it? 4:52. He looked toward the rain. "We cannot reach the board before loading begins." Victoria grabbed her keys. "We do not need the board to stop a crane." They left the house without turning off the kitchen light. Victoria drove. Luke called the terminal manager security and the crane control room. No one answered. The storm had disrupted part of the communications network, but the automated schedule remained active. When they reached the port access road, the eastern sky had begun to lighten. Crane 12 rose above the terminal. Its boom was already moving. Inside the control office, Grant stood behind the operator. A container lifted slowly from the deck of a waiting ship. The operator leaned toward the window. A low metallic groan traveled through the structure. He looked back at Grant. "Did you hear that Grant watched the performance clock on the wall?" "Keep moving." Grant's voice remained calm inside the control room. The crane operator looked through the rain-streaked glass toward the connector housing above them. The sound had stopped, but the silence that followed felt wrong. "The vibration changed," the operator said. Grant checked the clock again. The Ellis Marine vessel had already arrived 6 hours behind schedule. Every minute the ship remained at the terminal pushed another departure into overtime. Every delay would appear in the report Grant had to present to the board that afternoon. "The storm is affecting the sensors," he said. "Complete the lift." The operator kept one hand near the emergency stop. The regional office marked Crane 12 inactive. That restriction was entered without a completed engineering assessment. I authorized an operational exception. Director Bennett signed the shutdown, and I overruled it. The operator turned in his chair. "Can you do that?" Grant stepped closer. I just did. Outside the container rose another 3 feet. The cables tightened. The boom gave a low, shuddering groan. Luke heard it from the access road. Victoria's car had barely cleared the security gate when he opened the passenger door. "Stop here. We are still moving." "I know." "Luke." He stepped out before the car came to a complete stop. Rain struck his face as he ran toward the south terminal. Victoria braked near the operations building, left the engine running, and followed him with her phone pressed to her ear. "Emergency control, this is Victoria Bennett. Shut down Crane 12 immediately." Static answered. She tried again. Nothing. The storm had weakened, but the terminal communications system continued to fail in broken sections. Radios worked in one building and died in the next. The automated loading system, protected by a separate power source, remained active. Victoria reached for the handheld radio clipped inside the security vehicle parked near the gate. "Control room, respond." A burst of static. Then Grant's voice. "Loading is already in progress. Stop the crane. We have an active container over the deck. An uncontrolled interruption creates additional risk. Lower the load and shut down. The operator has reported no confirmed failure." Luke was already 200 yards ahead of her. Victoria ran after him. "Grant, this is a direct order." There was a pause. "Your original order was based on an employee's unofficial opinion. It was based on visible structural damage. Then we can discuss liability when the vessel is clear." Victoria stopped running long enough to speak into the radio with both hands around it. "If that crane moves another inch, the liability will belong to you." Grant did not answer. Luke crossed the painted boundary at the edge of the loading zone. Workers moved between equipment stations, unaware that the crane above them had already begun to fail. The boom stretched over the vessel like a dark steel arm. A shipping container hung 40 feet above the ground. Luke looked toward the connector housing. Gray dust drifted from the joint. Rain carried it downward in thin streaks. He felt the world narrow. The terminal noise faded. The engines, radios, rain, and distant ship horn seemed to fall behind one sound. A faint cracking pulse from inside the steel. Luke had heard something like it once before. Not at this terminal. Not beneath a crane. Inside a warehouse outside Charleston 4 years earlier. Emily had called him from beneath a damaged support frame. Her voice had been controlled, but he heard the fear she tried to hide. "The beam is talking," she had said. Steel did not speak. It shifted, strained, complained, and finally broke. People who understood it learned to listen before the last sound. Luke forced the memory away. 2 workers stood inside the boom's swing radius. Caleb Mercer was checking a loading manifest near a service truck. Another man, Martin Lewis, was guiding the container from the edge of the marked lane. Neither was looking up. Luke grabbed his radio. "Clear Crane 12. Static." He pressed the transmitter again. "Emergency evacuation. Clear 12 now." The message broke apart over the failing network. Caleb glanced toward his radio, then continued reading. Luke ran. "Get out of the lane." Caleb looked up. "What run east? Now!" Something in Luke's face removed the need for explanation. Caleb dropped the clipboard and ran. Martin remained near the container path. His ear protection covered most of the warning. Luke waved both arms. "Martin!" The crane groaned again. This time the sound rolled across the terminal. Workers stopped. The operator inside the control room reached for the emergency stop. Grant caught the back of the chair. "Do not stop with the load suspended. The pressure reading is falling. Lower it." The operator pushed the control forward. The container moved down. 3 feet. 2. The connector housing twisted. A sharp sound split the morning. Luke saw the fracture open along the edge of the joint. Martin move. Martin turned. The suspended container shifted sideways. For 1 second, he froze directly beneath its path. Luke crossed the final distance and struck him from the side. Both men hit the wet concrete behind a reinforced barrier. The connector failed. The sound was not an explosion. It was deeper. Steel tore through steel with a grinding roar that echoed between warehouses. The boom dropped 6 feet before the emergency brake caught. The container swung violently across the loading zone. Its lower corner struck the service truck. The windshield burst inward. The roof folded beneath the impact. A second cable snapped and lashed against the concrete. Workers ran in every direction. The crane rocked once, then settled at an angle. Rain fell through the cloud of metal dust. Luke lay with one shoulder pressed against the ground. Martin was beneath his arm, breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" Luke asked. Martin stared at the crushed truck. "I was standing there." "Can you move?" "I think so." Luke looked toward Caleb. The young worker had reached the opposite lane and crouched behind a stack of barriers. Luke rose. Pain moved through his left shoulder, but the joint worked. Blood ran from a shallow cut near his hairline. He ignored it. The crane operator's voice came through the radio. "Emergency brake engaged. Main boom unstable." Luke took control of the nearest working channel. "Lock the south yard. Nobody approaches crane 12. A floor supervisor answered. "Who is this Dawson? Establish a full exclusion zone from the connector base to lane 8. Shut off power to the crane. Do not release the secondary brake. The container is still suspended. I can see it. We need to lower it. No one touches the controls until the boom is secured." Luke pointed toward 2 workers gathering near the damaged service truck. "Move back. Everyone behind the yellow line." His voice was flat and exact. No panic, no wasted words. The old knowledge returned as though it had been waiting beneath his skin. He directed the electrical team toward the isolation panel. He ordered the loading crew away from the counterweight section. He sent one supervisor to confirm that every worker was accounted for. Victoria reached the scene with the radio in one hand. She saw the broken connector, the crushed truck, and Luke standing beneath the rain with blood along the side of his face. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. Then she saw Martin sitting behind the barrier. Alive. Caleb stood beside him. Alive. Every worker in the loading zone was moving. No one was beneath the crane. Victoria stepped into the lane. Luke raised one hand. "Stay outside the boundary. I am the regional director, and the boom does not care." Their eyes met. Victoria stopped behind the line. "What do you need emergency structural support from Charleston? 2 mobile cranes rated for the full boom weight. Fire and medical teams on standby. Nobody enters the control room except security." Victoria turned to the supervisors around her. "You heard him. Move." The men obeyed. Grant emerged from the operations building several minutes later. He wore a raincoat over his suit and carried a company radio. His eyes went first to the crane, then to the workers, then to Victoria. He began speaking before he reached them. "Mechanical failure during an active loading cycle. We need to document weather conditions and sensor irregularities." Luke turned toward him. This was not caused by weather. Grant stopped outside the marked boundary. "You are bleeding, Dawson. Let the response team handle this. You erased the alarm history. That is a serious accusation. You approved an operating exception after the shutdown order. The vessel was already committed to the terminal. The crane failed exactly where the inspection photographs showed fatigue." Grant looked around at the gathering workers. "This is not the place for an emotional argument." Luke walked toward the boundary. His hands were beginning to shake, but his voice remained steady. "You falsified a replacement record. You cleared maintenance alarms. You pressured Ray Cole to sign inspections for work that never happened." Grant's face changed. Only slightly. But Luke saw it. "Ray is months from retirement," Grant said. "His memory is not reliable. His notebook is." Victoria stepped beside Luke. It is already secured. Grant looked at her. You are relying on a private notebook provided by an employee who fears disciplinary review. We also recovered purchase records, labor invoices, and administrative access logs. Grant's mouth tightened. You accessed protected systems from your home. We preserved records after you blocked the archive. You were at home with him. Victoria understood the shape of the attack immediately. Grant was not defending the crane. He was building another story. One in which Luke was unstable, Ray was confused, and Victoria had compromised the investigation because of a personal relationship. Luke moved as though he might step forward. Victoria spoke first. My home address did not fracture that connector. Grant's expression hardened. You cannot lead this investigation. I do not intend to. That answer stopped him. Victoria raised her radio. Security restrict Mr. Holloway's access to all control systems and company records. Escort him to the administrative office until corporate counsel arrives. Grant laughed once. You do not have cause. Victoria looked toward the crushed service truck. The cause is 20 feet behind you. 2 security officers approached. Grant did not move. He looked at Luke. You think this makes you an engineer again? Luke stared back at him. No. The rain moved across his face. Saving those men did. Grant's eyes shifted toward Victoria. This company will not protect you when the board learns why you trusted him. Victoria's voice did not rise. I trusted the evidence. That is the part you never understood. The security officers escorted Grant away. He walked without resisting, but his posture remained stiff, as though he still believed the correct room and the correct audience could return control to him. Only after he disappeared inside the operations building did Luke's knees weaken. Victoria saw it. Luke, I am fine. You have blood on your face. It is a cut. You were beneath the boom. I was behind the barrier, after you ran into the loading zone. He looked toward the ambulance arriving near the gate. Martin was still there. Victoria stepped closer, stopping before she crossed the line he had drawn around himself. Let them examine you. There are other people who need help. No one else is injured. Luke looked around. Caleb was speaking with a paramedic. Martin sat beneath a blanket, his face pale but alert. The crane operator had left the control room and stood beside a security officer. Everyone was alive. The fact reached Luke slowly, like warmth returning to frozen hands. His radio slipped from his fingers. Victoria caught it before it struck the concrete. Luke stared at the broken crane. His breath shortened. The terminal vanished around him. For one terrible second, the rain became dust. The crushed truck became a collapsed warehouse entrance. Voices became sirens. He saw Emily's red safety helmet on the ground beside a broken beam. He saw a rescue worker remove his gloves before walking toward him. He remembered understanding the message before the man spoke. Victoria touched his arm. Luke. He flinched. She immediately released him. Look at me. He could not. The sound was the same, he said. Victoria followed his gaze toward the fracture. I know. No, you do not. His voice cracked. I heard it through the phone when the warehouse came down. Victoria said nothing. Luke pressed both hands against the concrete barrier. I told her to leave. She said she needed 5 minutes. His shoulders shook once. 5 minutes. Victoria moved beside him. Not in front of him. Not between him and the wreckage. Beside him. You could not reach her, she said. I should have found a way. You did today. Luke closed his eyes. That does not change what happened. No, Victoria's answer was quiet. It does not. He looked at her. She did not tell him Emily would have been proud. She did not tell him to forgive himself. She did not turn grief into something simple enough to solve with the correct sentence. She looked toward Martin and Caleb. It changes what happened to them. Luke followed her gaze. Martin's wife had arrived. She ran across the yard and wrapped both arms around him. Caleb sat on the back step of the ambulance, speaking rapidly to a paramedic while pointing toward Luke. The sight broke something open. Luke lowered his head. Victoria sat beside him on the concrete barrier. Their shoulders touched. He cried without making a sound. The rain hid part of it. Victoria stayed. By noon, corporate safety officers had taken control of the site. The damaged crane remained suspended beneath temporary supports. Engineers photographed every fracture surface. Security copied the control records before anyone could alter them. The recovered data confirmed that the warning system had activated 3 times during the previous month. Each alarm had been cleared through Grant's administrative account. The final shutdown order had been overridden at 4:41 that morning, 49 minutes before the connector failed. Ray arrived after hearing about the accident. He stood beyond the exclusion zone staring at the broken boom. Luke walked toward him. Ray's eyes filled when he saw Martin and Caleb speaking with investigators. "Nobody died?" he asked. "No." Ray removed his cap. "I should have given you the notebook months ago." Luke looked toward the crane. "You gave it before today." "Barely." "But you did." Ray pressed the cap between both hands. "Grant will say I signed everything willingly." "Did you?" Ray looked at him. "Some forms." "Yes." "Then tell them that. They could fire me. They could. My pension." Luke did not offer a promise he could not make. "Tell them the truth anyway." Ray studied his face. "You sound like her. Who your wife?" Luke had told Ray very little about Emily, only that she had been an engineer and that an ignored warning had killed her. He looked down at the water collecting near his boots. She believed people would do the right thing once they knew the truth. Was she wrong? Luke watched Victoria speaking with the corporate investigators. No. He took a breath. She was early. The emergency board session was scheduled for 2 days later. Between the accident and the hearing, Luke slept less than 4 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, the connector broke again. Sometimes Martin moved in time. Sometimes he did not. Sometimes the person beneath the container was Emily. At 3 in the morning, Luke stood in the kitchen drinking water when Lily appeared in the doorway. She wore oversized pajamas and held the blanket from her bed around her shoulders. "You are supposed to wake me when you get home late," she said. "I did not want to disturb you. You were on the news." Luke placed the glass on the counter. The local station had shown footage of the damaged crane. His name had appeared beneath a brief interview with a worker who credited him with ordering the evacuation. Lily walked closer. Claire said, "Nobody got hurt." "That is true. You got hurt. It is a scratch." She looked at the bandage near his hairline. "Did the crane fall? Part of it moved? Were you scared?" Luke considered lying. "Yes." Lily's face tightened. "Did you think about Mom?" He looked toward Emily's yellow raincoat hanging beyond the laundry room door. "Yes." Lily wrapped both arms around him. Luke bent and held her. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Lily's voice came muffled against his shirt. "Did you save people I helped them move?" "That means yes." Luke closed his eyes. "I was able to help this time." Lily leaned back enough to look at him. "You helped before, too. With your mother. She called you because she trusted you." Luke could not answer. Lily tightened the blanket around her shoulders. "She would be mad if you thought it was your fault." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped him. She did become angry when people ignored evidence. "She got that from me. You were 4. I was advanced." Luke touched her hair. "Go back to bed. Are you going to sleep?" "I will try." Lily looked toward the kitchen table. "Can I stay until you do?" Luke pulled out a chair. They sat together at Emily's old table until the sky began to lighten. The board gathered Thursday morning in a conference room overlooking the Savannah River. Victoria arrived carrying 3 document cases. Luke entered with Ray and an independent structural engineer from Charleston. Grant sat at the opposite end of the table beside corporate counsel. He wore a dark suit and an expression of controlled injury. The board chair, Margaret Ellis, began without ceremony. We are here to determine the causes of the Crane 12 failure and the conduct of every employee involved. Her eyes moved around the table. This is not a discussion of quarterly performance. It is not a public relations meeting. 2 workers were seconds from death. We will speak clearly. The independent engineer presented first. He displayed enlarged images of the failed connector. The fracture surface showed progressive fatigue that had developed over months. This damage was visible in the spring inspection photographs, he said. A complete internal assessment should have been ordered at that time. Grant folded his hands. The spring assessment was performed by a qualified contractor. The contractor recommended additional testing. That recommendation was not categorized as urgent because the report was modified. The engineer placed 2 documents side by side. The original contractor report included a paragraph calling for an internal connector examination within 30 days. The version stored in Coastal Meridian's active system did not. The board chair looked at Grant. Who had authority to alter this file? Several operational administrators. Your access code appears in the modification history. Access codes are shared during scheduling emergencies. Victoria spoke. Company policy prohibits shared executive credentials. Grant looked toward her. Company policy also prohibits undisclosed relationships between directors and direct reports. The room went still. Margaret Ellis raised one hand. We will address that separately. Grant leaned forward. It cannot be addressed separately. Director Bennett initiated an investigation based on the opinion of a man she had dinner with 4 days earlier. Luke remained silent. Victoria opened a folder. The dinner was arranged by my sister. Neither Mr. Dawson nor I knew the other person's identity before arriving. You expect us to believe that I submitted written disclosure to Human Resources before the Crane failure. She passed copies around the table. The disclosure was filed Wednesday at 7:14 in the evening. I requested independent review of all employment decisions involving Mr. Dawson. Grant glanced at the document. You continued meeting privately to preserve evidence after you blocked access to the maintenance archive. At your home? Yes. Grant looked toward the board members. A regional director alone at home with a direct subordinate reviewing company documents after a personal dinner. That is not objective conduct. Victoria did not look away. My conduct may be reviewed. It should be. The answer seemed to surprise him. She continued. If the board determines that I mishandled the disclosure process, I will accept the result. That does not alter the connector failure, the deleted alarms, the falsified maintenance invoices, or your decision to override a signed shutdown order. Grant pointed toward Luke. He is not a licensed engineer. Luke spoke for the first time. My license expired after I left structural practice. Then you had no standing to contradict the official assessment. The independent engineer turned toward Grant. He did not need an active license to recognize a visible fatigue pattern. Grant ignored him. Mr. Dawson has personal trauma involving an industrial accident. His judgment was emotional from the beginning. Luke's hands remained still on the table. You are right about one thing. Grant looked at him. I knew what ignored steel sounded like. Luke placed the original inspection photograph in front of him. That is why I looked twice. Grant pushed the image away. You constructed a theory and found frightened employees willing to support it. Ray shifted in his chair. Margaret Ellis turned toward him. Mr. Cole, did Mr. Dawson pressure you to provide your notebook? No. Why did you keep it? Ray looked at Grant. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. Because Mr. Holloway asked me to sign maintenance forms for work that was not done. Grant leaned back. That is false. Ray opened the notebook. March 17th, 2 years ago. Crane 7 brake inspection. No crew assigned. You asked me to sign because the vessel was already scheduled. Grant said nothing. August 9th. Crane 12 internal housing review. Cancelled after the replacement part was redirected. You told me to enter the work as complete. You signed it. I did. Ray swallowed. I was afraid of losing my pension. So you admit falsifying records? Yes. The room remained silent. Ray looked toward the board. I signed things I knew were wrong. I kept telling myself the work would be done later. Then I kept telling myself I would report it after retirement. His voice weakened. I was wrong. Grant watched him with open contempt. A frightened man trying to save himself. Ray closed the notebook. No. He looked directly at Grant. A frightened man who finally stopped saving himself. Margaret Ellis asked corporate security to present the digital records. The recovered logs showed that Grant's account had deleted alarm events, modified inspection files, and authorized the final operating exception. The control room recording captured the operator's concern about the changing vibration. It also captured Grant's response. Keep moving. No one spoke after the recording ended. Grant's lawyer whispered something to him. Grant shook his head. This company rewarded results, he said. Every person in this room praised reduced downtime. Every quarter you demanded lower costs and faster departures. Margaret Ellis regarded him steadily. No one ordered you to falsify safety records. You created the pressure, and you chose how to answer it. Grant looked toward Victoria. She would have made the same choices eventually. She simply had Dawson protecting her. Victoria's expression did not change. Luke did not protect me. She placed the failed connector sample at the center of the table. He protected the workers you left beneath that crane. Margaret Ellis closed the hearing folder. Mr. Holloway, you are suspended without pay pending termination review and referral to the appropriate authorities. Security will escort you from the building. Grant stared at the board chair. You cannot place this entirely on me. We are not, she replied. The board will commission an independent review of the company's oversight system, executive incentives, and maintenance approval process. 2 security officers entered. Grant stood slowly. As he passed Luke, he stopped. You think they will make you important now? Luke looked at him. I think they will make the crane safer. Grant's mouth tightened. Then he walked out. The door closed. The room seemed to release a breath. Margaret Ellis turned toward Ray. Your admission will be part of the investigation. So will the pressure placed on you. Until that review is complete, your employment and retirement benefits will remain protected. Ray lowered his head. Thank you. She looked at Victoria next. Your disclosure was timely, but the relationship created a conflict that requires formal separation of authority. I understand. Effective immediately, Mr. Dawson will no longer report through regional operations. Luke glanced toward Victoria. Margaret opened another folder. The Safety Committee has recommended the creation of a regional structural oversight position, independent from terminal operations, direct reporting to the Corporate Safety Board. She turned toward Luke. We would like you to accept it. Luke said nothing. The room waited. Margaret continued. The position requires renewal of your professional credentials. The company will provide the necessary support, but the decision is yours. Luke looked down at the proposed title. Regional Structural Safety Director. 3 years earlier, he had packed his engineering certificates into a box and placed them in the back of a closet. He believed leaving the profession would make the world smaller, safer, and easier to control. Then he looked toward Ray, toward the failed connector, toward Victoria. He thought of Martin standing beneath the container. He thought of Emily refusing to leave because she believed the fracture needed to be documented. What authority would the position carry, Luke asked. Full authority to suspend equipment pending independent assessment, without operations approval correct. Luke placed both hands on the table. I have conditions. Margaret nodded. State them. Every inspection carries the name and license number of the person responsible. No anonymous approval. No report edited without a visible record of who changed it. The board chair wrote something down. Agreed. No operations executive can override a structural shutdown without written approval from an independent engineer. Agreed. Workers who report safety violations receive written protection before they provide testimony. Not after. Margaret looked toward Ray. Agreed. Luke took a breath. And the first inspection is not Crane 12. A board member frowned. Why? Because we already know Crane 12 is broken. I want every crane grant postponed reviewed before another full load moves. Margaret leaned back. Does that mean you accept? Luke looked at Victoria. She gave him no encouraging smile, no silent request, no sign that he owed her a particular answer. Only a small nod. The choice was his. I accept. Outside the boardroom, Luke stood near the windows overlooking the river. His hands felt strangely light. Victoria approached, carrying her coat. Regional Structural Safety Director, she said. It sounds too long. You could request a smaller badge. I may. For a moment they stood beside each other without speaking. The last 2 days had changed the shape of everything between them. Luke's new position no longer reported to Victoria. The formal barrier that had kept them apart was gone. The reasons for caution remained. Grief, Lily, public attention, a company investigation. But they were no longer pretending Friday had never happened. Victoria looked toward the elevators. You did not have to accept. I know. You could have returned home and kept the life you built. Luke watched a cargo ship move slowly along the river. I thought I built that life to protect Lily. And now, maybe I built part of it to avoid being afraid. Victoria studied him. What changed? Luke looked at her. I was afraid this morning. The elevator doors opened. He did not move. I still ran. Victoria's expression softened. So did I. They stepped into the elevator. Their shoulders nearly touched. Neither moved away. The doors began to close when Victoria's phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Victoria answered. Hello? Her sister did not offer a greeting. I just saw Luke Dawson on the news. Victoria closed her eyes. Luke looked toward the ceiling. Claire continued, her voice loud enough for him to hear. Tell me that is not the Luke from the baseball field. Victoria said nothing. The silence lasted 1 second too long. Claire gasped. You have got to be kidding me. Claire's voice filled the elevator. Luke looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at the closing doors as if considering whether she could escape between floors. Claire continued without waiting for an answer. You worked with him for 14 months. Yes, and neither of you ever mentioned the other. He was one of several supervisors. Luke raised an eyebrow. Victoria added, a particularly difficult supervisor. Claire heard him laugh. He is standing there with you. Yes. Put me on speaker. No. Victoria. The elevator reached the lobby. Victoria ended the call. Her phone rang again before the doors opened. Luke stepped out beside her. She will keep calling. I know. Claire is persistent. I have known her longer than you have. The phone rang a third time. Victoria silenced it. She is going to come here. Luke glanced through the lobby windows. Claire's car pulled sharply into the visitor lane. Victoria closed her eyes. She is already here. 20 minutes later, all three sat around a small table in the company cafeteria. Claire still wore her school identification badge. Her hair had loosened from its clip and she held a folded newspaper in one hand. Luke's photograph appeared above a short report about the crane failure. Claire placed the paper on the table. This is the quiet man from the baseball field. Luke nodded. And this is my sister who apparently runs half the shipping industry. Not half, Victoria said. That is not the important part. Claire pointed at Luke. You told me you worked near the port. I do. Then she pointed at Victoria. You told me your terminal had a supervisor who questioned every report. It has several supervisors. You both speak like legal documents. Luke folded his hands. In our defense, you refused to provide last names. Claire stared at him. That was supposed to make the date interesting, not professionally dangerous. Victoria reached for her coffee. You succeeded at both. Claire looked between them. Her anger softened into disbelief. Did you know each other before Friday? We knew each other's work, Victoria said. Luke looked down at the table. We did not know much else. Claire studied him more carefully. And now Luke glanced at Victoria. The answer lived in the silence between them. Claire leaned back. Oh. Victoria gave her a warning look. Claire ignored it. That is why you are both acting as though someone changed the air pressure. Claire. I am only observing. Luke almost smiled. Claire looked at him again. I chose you because you never treated Lily like she was an obstacle between you and the rest of your life. Luke's expression changed. Then Claire turned to her sister. And I chose him because every man you date either agrees with everything you say or spends the evening trying to impress you. I have not dated that many men. You searched one man's property records. He lied about owning a vineyard. Luke looked down to hide a smile. Claire continued. Luke would never be impressed by your title. No, Victoria said. He is usually irritated by it. That is healthy for you. Claire folded the newspaper. I thought I was introducing strangers. Victoria looked at Luke. You introduced two people who were very committed to pretending they were strangers. Claire's face softened. Then maybe I did exactly what I meant to do. That evening, Luke sat at the kitchen table while Lily finished her homework. The television remained off. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, gentler than the storm that had covered the crane yard. Lily erased a word from her notebook. Claire said you are getting a new job. It is not official until I renew my license. Will you still work at the port at several ports? Will you be gone more? Luke had considered contracts, travel, and inspections. He had not considered the question in Lily's voice. Sometimes he said, But I will plan around you. You always say that. I mean it. She closed the notebook. Is Victoria still your boss? No. Lily looked up. Does that mean you can date her? Luke leaned back. It means the company cannot tell us that we should not. That is not what I asked. He smiled despite himself. I would like to take her to dinner again. Lily became quiet. Luke waited. She looked toward the cabinet where Emily's coffee mug remained behind the glass door. Will she come here? Only when you are ready. Will she use Mom's things? No. Will she sit in Mom's chair? Luke glanced at the chair beside him. Emily had always sat there nearest the kitchen window. He moved to the floor and knelt beside Lily. No one is taking your mother's place. Lily picked at the corner of her notebook. Then what place does Victoria get? Luke wished he had a perfect answer. I did not. I do not know yet. Lily studied his face. The honesty seemed to calm her. Okay. Okay. You can have dinner. That is generous. I know. She reopened her notebook. After a moment, she added, But I want to meet her before she comes here. Luke nodded. That is fair. They met Saturday afternoon at a park overlooking the Savannah River. Victoria arrived 10 minutes early and waited beside a picnic table with 3 bottles of water. Lily approached carrying a large drawing pad against her chest. Victoria did not reach for a hug. She did not speak to Lily in the soft, exaggerated voice adults often used with children. She simply said, Your father tells me you design ships. He says I draw boats. He lacks ambition. Luke looked at Victoria. Lily smiled. She placed the drawing pad on the table and opened it to a cargo ship with a research laboratory on the upper deck. The ship had 3 radar towers, 6 propellers, and a glass room beneath the waterline. Victoria studied it carefully. Why 3 towers? 2 are for science. And the third? It looks better. Victoria nodded. That is a valid engineering reason? Luke laughed. Lily looked pleased. They walked along the river while ships moved beyond the trees. Luke stayed slightly behind, allowing Lily and Victoria to speak without him controlling every moment. Lily asked Victoria whether she liked boats. Victoria looked toward the water. "I like people who make sure they come home safely." Lily glanced at Luke. She understood enough. At the picnic table, she tore the drawing carefully from the pad and slid it toward Victoria. "You can keep this one." Victoria touched the edge of the paper. "Are you sure I already started a better one?" Victoria opened her work folder and placed the drawing between two clean sheets so it would not bend. Lily noticed. She said nothing, but her shoulders relaxed. Over the next several weeks, Coastal Meridian changed in visible ways. Crane 12 remained surrounded by repair lights while independent engineers inspected every major structure in the region. Ray testified to investigators and admitted signing records he knew were false. His employment and retirement benefits remained protected while the review continued. Grant was formally terminated. The company referred evidence to state authorities and accepted responsibility for the failures in its maintenance system. Victoria stood before the terminal crews and did not blame everything on one man. "We allowed production pressure to become more powerful than verification," she told them. "That failure belongs to the system as well as the people who abused it." Luke watched from the back of the room. She did not protect herself with careful language. She told the truth plainly. His respect for her changed into something quieter and deeper. Luke began the process of renewing his engineering license. His first assignment took him to a terminal north of Savannah, where a young engineer named Dana Price questioned a support bearing that had already passed inspection. The operations manager interrupted her twice. Luke raised one hand. "We stop the equipment until she finishes speaking." The terminal lost half a day. The inspection revealed a damaged bearing beneath the mounting plate. On the drive home, Luke realized he had not felt trapped by the work. He had felt useful. Before his second dinner with Victoria, he drove to the cemetery. Emily's grave rested beneath an oak tree near the back fence. She had hated cut flowers, so Luke brought none. He carried his new company identification badge. Luke Dawson, Regional Structural Safety Director. He sat on the grass. For several minutes he said nothing. "I thought leaving engineering meant I was choosing Lily," he finally said. "Maybe part of me was only choosing fear." Wind moved through the branches. "I kept thinking that if I made life small enough, nothing could reach us." He looked at Emily's name carved into the stone. It still did. Luke placed the badge on the grass. "I am not leaving you behind." His voice tightened. "But I cannot stay here with you." He picked up the badge and returned it to his pocket. That evening he entered the same riverfront restaurant where the blind date had begun. His hands were clean. He wore the dark blue shirt Lily had chosen, but this time the collar no longer felt too tight. The hostess smiled. "Table 9. Luke nodded. Victoria was already seated beneath the candlelight. She looked up as he approached. Luke stopped beside the empty chair. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning to stand there all evening? I am deciding whether I know you." "That did not stop you last time." He sat. The same low music played near the bar. Boats moved beyond the windows. Farther down the river, the port cranes blinked against the night sky. There was no discussion of reporting structures or disclosure forms. Those questions had answers now. Victoria placed her hand on the table between them. Luke looked at it. For 4 years he had believed that loving someone meant giving the world another way to hurt him. He had tried to protect himself by never reaching for anything he could lose. But refusing to reach had not made loss impossible. It had only made loneliness certain. Luke placed his hand over hers. Victoria turned her palm upward and threaded her fingers through his. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire appeared. "Lily is asleep at my house. Do not invent an emergency. Finish dinner." Luke showed Victoria. She laughed. Outside the river carried the lights of the city in long, broken reflections. Crane 12 stood in the distance beneath repair lamps. It no longer looked like the place where everything nearly ended. It looked like proof that broken things could be examined, understood, and rebuilt. Victoria squeezed his hand. "What are you thinking?" Luke looked across the candle at her. "That I am glad I did not leave the first night. The restaurant. The table." Victoria smiled. Luke smiled back. For the first time in 4 years, he did not calculate what the moment might cost. He simply let himself have it.